Well, I'm pretty late to the game with the vinyl tag this year, but at Steve Carlson's urging, I decided to make a video. I've never done one of these before, so I put together my answers to the 20 questions, and this is probably the last one that's going to get posted on YouTube, but here goes. So vinyl tag 2020 questions. The first one was my best find of 2019. Well, there were quite a few. But I would have to say probably the best one that I found was at Record Store Day, surprisingly enough, the Lost in Translation soundtrack. This one had been pressed originally back in the early 2000s, and that copy sells for hundreds of dollars now, and there have been a few bootlegs in between. So there was an official release for Record Store Day on this really pretty violet vinyl. And I was lucky enough to grab one of those when it was available. So, very happy to do so. That was my best find, but there were a lot of other records I could mention also. The next question was my favorite album of 2019. Well, I didn't really buy that many new records that were released in 2019, but the one that immediately comes to mind was the new Pixies record, Beneath the Eyrie. I did grab that at my local record store when I had some store credit. It's on white vinyl. It's a really beautiful packaging, and I had not heard any new Pixies in a long time. I didn't buy Indie Cindy or any of the other albums that have come out since then. So I was very impressed with this really strong set of songs, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So that's going to be my choice for album of 2019. Next up is a novelty record. So I'm always buying novelty records. The ones that I thought of were Mrs. Miller's Greatest Hits. Just a wonderful collection of some of her songs. Of course, my favorite by her is her version of Up, Up, and Away. And that one is not on here, but you've got Downtown, which was released as a single. A Hard Day's Night, These Boots Are Made for Walking. A lot of people really can't stand Mrs. Miller, and I can sort of empathize, but her music is very funny, and I really enjoy it. So, gonna go with Mrs. Miller, and then honorable mention would have to be Charo, Let's Spend the Night Together, with the South Soul Orchestra. Or actually, this is called Coochie Coochie. The song, the big hit, I guess, on here is Let's Spend the Night Together. So this is another great novelty record. Next question, an homage cover that pays tribute to another artist. So here is the cover that's being paid homage to, Madonna's Like a Virgin. And my selection is, ta-da! The Lords of the New Church, Like a Virgin. Great album cover. You can't get a better homage than that, I should think. And it's a pretty funny interpretation of Madonna's hit, too. Moving right along, let's see what's next on the list here. So a B-side and a deep cut or a deep cut. So I'm going to go for the B-side. I showed this in one of my videos earlier this year. This was Dolby's Cube, and I really enjoyed the B-side, Goo Goo Plexus Cube Creature Caviar. The A-side's pretty decent too, but on this one the B-side was the best track, so that's my selection for that. And then for a deep cut, I am going to select Hugo Montenegro. This album is called Others by Brothers, and the track is I Heard It Through the Grapevine. It's got some wonderful spacey synth that you wouldn't expect in an R&B classic. This whole album is excellent, and I'm gonna choose those two. So let's see what's next here. Something funky. All right. Well, I immediately thought of Going Bananas by Side Effect. Gotta bust this one out so you can see the vinyl. Such a funky record. Funky all the way through. Beautiful banana yellow vinyl. Just awesome So I really like the title track, Going Bananas. And then I had an honorable mention for this, which is George Clinton's Computer Games. I bought this one with the lenticular cover this year. Got it cheap on Discogs. I think I paid around $15 for it. Super funky album. Funky fresh. And then if I had it on vinyl, which I don't, I would have to also throw in O'Donnell Levi's, what's the name of the album? I can't remember. The name of that O'Donnell Levi album was Everything I Do Gonna Be Funky From Now On. I don't have it. I'm on the hunt for it. So if anyone wants to throw it my way, I'd be more than happy to take it. All right, next question up was Weird Shelf Buddies, records next to each other that make an odd pair. So I throw all of my stuff together, so I run into this all the time. I'll see two records and think, oh, well, that's really odd that those two should have happened to be together. But I noticed that the last 4 records in my collection at the office make some pretty strange bedfellows. So let me bust those out for your entertainment. So first we have Pia Zadora, I Am What I Am. Right after Pia Zadora, the Zodiac, mind-blowing cosmic music from the 60s. Right after that would be Zvuki Mu. Really offbeat 80s Russian sort of new wave pop. And then to wind it all up, ZZ Top, Tres Hombres. I think you could find a lot of dissimilarity among those 4 choices. Next up was I Was There, a band I have seen. So I'm going to be pimping Low Moon again. This is their first LP release. I bought it at their concert about 2 years ago when I saw them. Got it signed by all the band members. Went to see them again a couple of months later in Washington, D.C. Bought their new album. Got it signed by all the band members too. Just a great group. So super friendly. Love their music. I'm always telling people check out Low Moon if you've never heard them before. The next question, wish I had an OG copy, but I have a repress. Well, that's going to be the first Dead Can Dance album for me. Just self-titled Dead Can Dance. I just picked up a copy of this last week, as a matter of fact. And looks like a pretty nice repress. I did have an original copy of this back in the 80s. And in fact, I had the first EP and then the first 5 LPs. And this one just somewhere got lost along the way, so it would be nice to have an original copy to have a complete set of the early stuff. But I'm more than happy to have this 2017 or 2018 repress from 4AD. Okay, can't get that one in the bag. Let's move on. Okay, a discography that I own, and I own all major releases of an artist or artists I own the most of. Well, there's a lot of bands that I collect obsessively, so I can't really narrow this down. So I'm just going to go with my all-time favorite American rock band, which is Blue Oyster Cult. So I have everything by them on CD. In fact, it's pretty easy to do. They have a remastered box set that they came out with a couple of years ago that has, I think, all, like, I don't know, 20 of their Columbia studio albums. And then I've also got some of the Stock Forest group stuff and solo stuff. So this is just kind of a representative selection. Cultosaurus Erectus album from, I think, 1980. Wonderful album. One of my favorite bands of all time. If you've never heard Blue Oyster Cult, I strongly urge you to check them out. They're well worth your time. Unique Center label. Okay, for this one, I'm going with an album that I actually had to track down. I bought a reissue of it this past year. It's A Kiss in the Dream House by Susie and the Banshees. And there's a song on here, it's called Round, or Circle actually. And it just, the chorus goes round and around and around. And as you're playing the song, you can look at this great hypnotic label The other side just has words on it, but I definitely wanted to get this UK pressing because of that triangle with the spiral inside. It's very hypnotic when you're playing it on your turntable. Not to mention the fact that this is a lovely Susie and the Banshees record, one of their very best. And the repress ain't half bad either. On to the next question. Prebanned, an album or a band that featured someone who went on to be famous. So for this one, I picked Skids, which was a Scottish band. Most of their body of work was produced in the 1970s and then onto the beginning of the 80s. And one of the band members, Richard Jobson, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, did go on to form the band The Armory Show and also had some solo work. The other person, though, became extremely famous, and that's Stuart Adamson, who unfortunately took his own life quite a few years ago, but he's best known as the founder of the band Big Country. And Big Country did go on to be huge. So Skids, in their music, you can hear a lot of that early Big Country sound and see where Stuart Adamson was headed with his guitar style. So this album is actually called The Absolute Game. They put out, I think, about 4 or 5 LPs and some singles. Skids. So a musical book or movie that I'd recommend. Okay, this one was pretty easy for me. A couple of years ago, local bookstore was going out of business, and I picked up some books, and this was in the stack. Something that I actually would have paid good money for, but I didn't have to. It's John Peel's partially autobiography and partial biography. It is Margrave of the Marshes. Well, it says it's his autobiography, but his wife also wrote some biographical material at the end. And it has colored pictures inside. It's pretty long, but it just has some extremely funny anecdotes. And we're talking about a DJ who just was extremely influential on the alternative, new wave and punk, and even going back into the 60s, acid rock, and just about any kind of movement you can think of. John Peel had a hand in promoting its welfare and championing artists who were undiscovered yet. I just can't say enough about the guy. I actually heard his show when I was in Germany back in the early 90s. And I was lucky enough to catch some of that. It's hard to find any of his old broadcasts, even on the internet these days. So just a lot of fascinating stuff. As you can imagine, there's some information about Marky Smith and the Fall in here, who's also now deceased. So just a fascinating time capsule from the last 50 years of music. Loved reading this. It's wonderful. Okay. Next selection, underrated album. Okay, well, people are probably going to throw virtual bricks at me, but I am going to select Under Wraps by Jethro Tull, the album that Ian Anderson did with Peter John Vitesse, their new keyboardist, and it really has a very heavy keyboard influence, but it also has very strong melodies, some of Ian Anderson's best songwriting, I think. And tunes that are quite memorable. And it seems like the biggest criticism that most people have of this album is the drum sound. Okay, so the drum sound's not that great, but personally I don't really care. I just like the album a lot. It's got a spy theme, and I think it's a lot of fun. So it's not only underrated, it's quite maligned unfairly, I think. Batting average artist or band who consistently makes good albums. Well, there's so many. I thought Teenage Fan Club, Led Zeppelin. I mean, you could throw a lot of bands in. Black Sabbath. I'm going to pick a band who lost their founding member this past year. God, there's been so much of that going on this past year. It's really, really sad. So I'm going to put a little memorial and tribute out here to Rick Ocasek's band, The Cars. And I just picked this album up this past year, door to door. I used to have it. I bought another copy and listened to it again, and I think it's a great album. So it's hard to beat that first run of albums by The Cars in the late 70s to early 80s. Just a seminal band. Okay, next question. We have same album, different cover. Okay, well, one immediately sprang to mind for me, and that was Pilot's second album. Here's the original one. It's called Second Flight. Cover's okay. It's kind of a... I don't think it's a very impressive cover. And then I guess the song January must have really taken off in the charts, and it was re-released with the same tracks, but a slightly different order, and it was released as the album January. So this is the same album, and I haven't played this copy, so I don't know what it sounds like, but I imagine it sounds pretty good, and I like the cover better. Anyway, all right, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Next one, an album you bought cheap that's now worth money. Okay, so for me, that would be Linda Perhack's Parallelograms. I found this album at an estate sale about 4 or 5 years ago, and I already knew it was very rare. I had the CD issue on Sundays, and it's been re-released on vinyl on Sundays. This is an original cap pressing. It's in this condition in today's market, based on what I see on Discogs and eBay. I'm thinking this copy would probably sell for about $600 or $700. But keep in mind, you know, something's only worth what people are willing to pay for it. However, this is a highly desirable acid folk album from the early 70s, and it's still got the shrink wrap on. The gentleman who owned it left a little note on it, but fortunately he taped it to the outside of the shrink wrap, so the album itself is in perfect condition. That's the disc and the jacket, and I paid $10 for it. I immediately knew what it was and grabbed it along with a Pentangle record. And needless to say, that was one of the best shopping experiences I've ever had, but deals like that are few and far between. Anyway, so that's my selection. Linda Perhack's Parallelograms. Wonderful album. Okay. Favorite drummer. I don't know. I really had to think about this. There's a lot of drummers I like. I mean, there's, Neil Peart, Lenny White. I don't know. The one I decided to go with, though, is John Bonham. There's just something about his drumming style where every track has its own characteristics, and it just meshes perfectly with what the band is trying to accomplish in that song. And I don't have In Through the Outdoor, but I think my absolute favorite all-time John Bonham drum work is on the song Fool in the Rain. Just especially that one part where the drums really speed up near the end and then they slow down and have that kind of shuffle rhythm going. So as a representative album, I'm just going to stick Presence out there. Just his drum work on Achilles' Last Stand is incredible. So John Bonham. Okay, winding down. So turning 20, an album turning 20 in 2020. Well, there wasn't really a lot of vinyl being pressed in 2000. That was at the advent of the MP3 era. I was still listening to vinyl, but it was mostly older stuff that I was buying, and I was buying a lot of CDs. So I'm going to go with the CD that turned 20 this year. It's a little project called Logan Sanctuary, which was totally cool, I thought, because I'm a big fan of Logan's Run. So this is Joseph Manning, Roger Manning Jr. and Brian Wrightsell put this out. And there is a pressing of this on vinyl, but I think it might have been a re-release done within the last few years. So this came out in 2000, and it's basically a reimagining of the Logan's Run universe, just done in album form, if that makes any sense. So if you're a Logan's Run fan or sci-fi fan, or you just like sci-fi themed music, definitely check this one out. It's a really cool little CD. And then finally, a trilogy of albums, 3 solid albums back to back from the same artist or band. Should be a connecting thread. Okay, so my 3, the last 3 in the stack here, are XTC's English Settlement, followed by Mummer. And then the last one being The Big Express from 1985. So the common thread in all these, other than the fact that they're consecutive albums that XTC released, they're pretty significant in XTC's output because during the time that English Settlement came out, Andy Partridge was suffering from a nervous breakdown on stage. And it was so bad that he decided he could never perform live again. So XTC then became a studio band. So these next two albums after English Settlement, Mummer and The Big Express, were their first real forays into studio recording, where they began to hone their skills and make these just phenomenal records. So those are my three. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. It was a lot of fun to make. It did take some thought. I think I might do this every year because I'm sure I'll have different choices every year. And shout out to Steve, and thank you for prodding me into doing a vinyl tag video. So please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thank you.